You are listening to the Primitive Intelligence Podcast, episode 606, The Black-Eyed Kids. After last week, reading the stories about Bigfoot and the Dogmen and Skinwalkers and finding those two stories about the Black-Eyed Kids mixed into those stories, I was like, I got to dig a little bit deeper into this. So this week, I covered two books, and I'm going to give you the information on them here. The first one was Danger at Your Door, Encounters with Black-Eyed Kids by Gemma Jade. And the second one is The Chilling True Terror of Black-Eyed Kids, a Monster Compilation 3rd edition by Michael Vasey. The links will be down in the show notes. Now, this isn't to promote the books or anything like that, but I look at it this way. If I'm going to find these books and I'm going to pull some information out of them and use them for the show, I'm going to promote them a little bit because, hey, why not? These are good books. Go check them out if you're interested in Black-Eyed Kids. There's a lot more in these than what I'm going to talk about in the episode. So definitely go ahead and check those out. But without any further ado, this creepy black-eyed episode of the Primitive Intelligence Podcast starts now. So yeah, after the stories I read last week about Dogman, Bigfoot, and all that, and those two random stories about the Black-Eyed Kids really made me want to dig a little deeper into this, because I've heard the phrase, and I've heard a few stories about the Black-Eyed Kids, but I really only first heard about them about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And other than things that I had heard on other podcasts or had read short stories about, I really didn't know much about them. So I figured now's a good time to do a little bit more research, and picked up these two books, checked them out, and I'm going to pull some information out of them. Now, the first real story that made this popular, kind of brought the Black-Eyed Kids into the public, I guess, was by Brian Bethel. Now, he was a journalist in Texas in 1996, and on his way home one night, he stopped at a drop-off box at like a mini mall so he could pay one of his utilities. It's around 10 p.m., and he was sitting in the car. He parks the car, he turns on the light, and he's writing the check. And all of a sudden he hears a knock on the window. A little bit startled. And he looks up and he sees these two boys around 10 years old. One's a little bit older, one's a little bit younger. The older one has like dark curly hair, and the younger one has like red hair and freckles, he says. They're dressed in hoodies, and as the interaction goes on, he realizes their eyes are completely black. And just like no iris, no nothing, just black orbs in their heads. And the one boy that he calls the spokesman states that he and his brother wanted to buy tickets to see a movie, but they had forgotten their money at home, and asked if he could let them into the car, drive them back to their home to get their money, and then bring them back to the movie theater. And while this boy is speaking, Brian's starting to get this overwhelming sense of terror. He can't explain it. He doesn't know why. They're just two kids. But he notices that their eyes are black, and they're just odd. And the boy who's speaking is speaking in this odd monotone fashion, but he's very confident, he says. It's very weird for a kid that age. And Brian starts to realize that it's too late for them to see this movie if he takes them anywhere. Like, it's 10 o'clock. The final showing of any movies has already started. So if he drives them home, drives them anywhere and comes back, the movie's going to be over. So as he's thinking all this, and he's kind of trying to put all this together, this boy keeps saying things like, it won't take long. We're just two little kids. We don't have a gun or anything. And this is when he realizes something's really, really wrong. And as he's trying to figure this out in his head, and this kid's kind of making these assurances, he realizes he's actually reaching for the door handle. he doesn't want to. And he says it was almost like it was out of his control. Like this kid was like making him reach for the door handle. And he just starts to roll the window up. He's like, nope. He goes, I don't care what people think. If there's anybody else in the parking lot and they see me ignoring these two kids, I don't care what they think. He starts rolling the window up. And the spokesman, the older boy, just starts like hitting the window. Boom, boom, boom. And he starts like more, I don't know if he's really yelling, but a little more sternly. He's saying, we can't come in unless you let us in, or unless you tell us it's okay. He says, we can't come in unless you tell us it's okay. Let us in. And Bethel he's like, nope, I'm out. Starts the car, takes off. And as he's pulling out of the parking lot, he kind of looks in the mirror, and he says there wasn't enough time for his kids to run anywhere. It was a parking lot. He takes off. He looks in the rearview mirror real quick. The kids are gone, vanished. No time for him to run anywhere. He only has eyes off them for a couple seconds as he like turned the car and started to drive away, and he just looked in the rearview mirror, and they're gone. Now, this was the first real story that gained traction about the black-eyed kids. But since this came out, there's been more stories that have come out, some of them predating 1996, some 1950s. But what are the black-eyed kids? It's a really weird phenomenon. The book Danger at Your Door goes over more of this, and I'm not going to get into each one of these in depth, but some of the ideas are they could be demons, they could be aliens, they could be alien-human hybrids, they could be elementals, they could be the offspring or the adolescent forms of men in black / women in black, or something else entirely that we just don't understand. There are some common characteristics, some commonalities in a lot of these stories. Not all of them. There are ones that are slightly different. But some of the commonalities are there's often two or more of them. Again, not always, but often two or more of them. They have very pale skin, large black eyes, or holes where their eyes should be. They often appear at night. They speak with an odd cadence, very robotic, but monotone, no emotion whatsoever in their voice. When they're communicating with each other, and sometimes with the witnesses, they seem to be able to communicate telepathically. A lot of times in some of these stories, the older one will be trying to talk the witness into letting them into their house or their car. And then the younger one will either start getting nervous or giggle or laugh about something they shouldn't laugh about, like just kind of like this weird, like, ha, 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 ha. And the older one will turn and just stare at them, and they'll look at each other for a couple minutes, never say anything verbally, and then turn and then start again. It's almost like they're communicating telepathically. It'll start out asking for assistance. Sometimes they come in and use a telephone. Other times they come in to eat or get warm or rest because they're tired. If they appear at a vehicle, they need a ride, or they need, they're cold. They want to come in the car to warm up. They need a ride somewhere. But it always appears as though they need permission to come in, either the home or the vehicle. When their requests are denied, or these beings, these things feel like the person they're talking to realizes that the jig is up, then they start to get more persistent, often saying things like, you'll regret not helping us, or you're making a big mistake. And they may shout sometimes or scream and make this weird, almost like animalistic howl. And, if it's a car or a door, they'll bang on it a little bit harder. but they don't. I didn't read anything where they got physically violent to the people, but there are some stories where people got sick afterwards, and sometimes seriously, or like it. There was a couple stories where the people let them in, and I'm not going to really go too in depth in those because most of them, the beginnings of the stories are the same. But a couple stories I read where the person had let these black-eyed kids into their home. Either the person or the people that interacted with them got sick, in some cases up to and including death, or if there was pets. Like one story, they had cats, and the cats all hid, and they were usually very very sociable, these cats, but they all hid. And then after these black-eyed kids finally left the house, I think in that one, men in black showed up to collect them, which was weird. But afterwards, the cats start to disappear. They just find like the cats either gone and never find them again, or dead in the yard. And it was just really weird. So like those are the kind of outlier stories where when they say that you're going to regret not helping them, but it seems like you regret helping them more than anything else. So in the first book, I was talking about Danger at Your Door, the author tells the story of her friend that she calls Chelsea. And Chelsea is driving down a road in northern New Jersey on a road called Clinton Road, which apparently has a reputation for being haunted. So she's driving down the road. It's around 3 a.m. and she notices that she has a flat tire. So she pulls over, not wanting to damage the tire anymore or damage the car anymore, and decides, well, there's no houses for a while, but maybe there's a house. Maybe I can find someone that's home. There's more of a chance at this time of day at 3 a.m. to find someone at home sleeping than there is a chance of there being someone driving by that's going to help her. So she decides to start walking. She goes maybe about a half mile, and she decides to stop to light a cigarette. And as she's doing so, she notices these two girls come walking out of the woods. There's like a field, and then like forest on the edge of the field. And these two girls come walking down. They're kind of dressed kind of in tatters and like in rags. And kind of in similar fashion, one appears to be a little bit older than the other. They both have blonde hair. And again, this Chelsea just gets this ominous feeling. Now, she is on this road that's known to be haunted. I think at the time it says she was 20 years old. She knows this road has this reputation of being haunted. She's got a flat tire. It's 3 a.m. She's walking down the road, and these two teenage girls come just stumbling out of the woods towards her. So she's a little freaked out. And she kind of looks at them, and they're kind of approaching her, and she's like, I'm just going to mind my own business, and I'm going to keep on walking. So she keeps walking, hoping that they ignore her as much as she's ignoring them. And that's not what happens. So as she starts walking away, they start calling out to her, and they start saying, hey, what are you doing out here? Hey, what are you doing out here? So she starts to think, all right, if they need help, I don't want to be the person to not help them, but also they might be able to help me. So she tells them, my car has a flat. I'm trying to get some help. And this is one of these instances where the younger of the two black-eyed children, these girls, laughs. And at this point, she can't see, it's dark enough. She can't really see their eyes. So she just knows that there's these two girls there. And the younger one laughs, and the older one turns and stares at her for a minute, and then looks back at her and says, we need to get home. You need to give us a ride. And she's like, I can't. My car is a flat. Like, I'm trying to get my car fixed. I can't help you. And they keep insisting that, the older one, the spokesperson of this pair, keeps insisting that she helps. And she's getting annoyed, and she's getting this very weird feeling still from them. So she decides, you know what? I changed my mind. I'm just going to go back to my car. I'll risk driving it. So she turns and she starts heading back to her car. And she says she doesn't even have to turn around. She knows they're following her. Because as soon as she starts to walk away and basically denies them their request of help, the younger of the two girls starts this very fake, played up cry. Like no emotion to it, no tears, just kind of like a like this fake cry. And the older one, they're just walking behind her with the young one making this cry and the older one saying, hey, 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 hey. Exactly the same every time. And she just keeps walking. Hey, hey, right? So finally she gets fed up. She turns around and she's like, I'm not helping you. You need to stop following me. And they just keep going, hey, we need a ride. She turns around, she keeps walking. This happens 2 or 3 times before she finally just kind of loses it and just basically screams in their faces, I'm not helping you. You need to leave me alone. Get away from me. And they give her this kind of creepy smile. And they just look at her and they turn and they walk into the woods. Now, again, there's no lights. So she can't, there's shadows on their faces, right? Their faces are dark. So she doesn't really notice that their eyes are actually black yet. They just walk off into the woods again. And Chelsea's like, okay, I gotta get back to the car. I gotta get out of here. This is weird. So she keeps walking. A couple minutes later, she gets to where her car is. And there's the 2 girls standing in front of her car. At this point, she looks at them. And they kind of turn their heads and they look at her. And just kind of the way the lighting of the, like, it's a little bit more of an open area. She can clearly see their faces and she can see that they have black eyes. And they're just grinning at her. And it starts to get really weird because the older one starts with, hey, you need to give us a ride. Hey, you need to give us a ride. And the small one's just kind of staring at her. And she says it's kind of weird because she's trying to get, like, position herself so she can get around them and get to her car. And the older one kind of makes this weird motion, like kind of turns kind of weird and looks at her and bends over like she's looking at something on the road. Just kind of stops, kind of half bent over looking down the road and just starts saying, hey, 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 hey. And the younger one kind of turns and looks at the older one, kind of odd, and starts poking her in the side of the head. Just poke, 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 as this one's just looking down at the ground going, hey, hey, hey. Chelsea's like, all right, this is my chance. I can get to the car. I'm out. Runs over to the car, unlocks it, gets in, closes the door, looks up. The tall one's still bent over looking at the ground saying, hey. And the little one is now right next to her window and just starts screaming like this weird, like a howling, screaming screech. And she's like, I'm gone. I don't care about the tire anymore. She starts driving away. So she gets away from them as quickly as she can and then slows down a little bit and looks in the mirror. And as she's driving by the taller one, she can hear the taller girl still just looking at the ground going, hey, hey, hey. She looks in the mirror and the little one's next to her again, just poking her in the side of the head. And she's like, it's like she was a robot that just started malfunctioning. And then she just drove until she could get her car fixed. But the hell is that all about? That's where some of the ideas of, because Men in Black stories a lot of times are they don't understand basic things. They get confused easily by like drinking from a cup, like weird things like that. So I think this is where people get this idea that maybe they're kind of like Men in Black, or maybe they are aliens or alien hybrids, and they just don't quite understand. But sometimes they act robotic. The weird monotone voices. The rest of that book, it's a lot of in-depth look at what black-eyed kids are. There are some stories about a couple daytime encounters, which are more rare from what I can tell, and what's stated in the book, which are both kind of weird. And it's the first mention I've seen in one chapter of white-eyed kids. And I saw this story in both books. It was a little bit different in the two books, which you'd expect from different authors, but the gist of the story is the same. But basically, the white-eyed kids, in this story, it's the guy gets a knock on the door, immediately is terrified, is very common. Opens the door, there's two kids on the porch, they want to come in to use the phone. They start getting, not aggressive, but more demanding. And it kind of snaps this guy out of it. Like he was about ready to let them in, and he kind of, I'm not letting you in. And he closes the door and he starts banging on the door. So this guy's like, I'm not putting up with this. And he's like, look, I've got a gun and I will go get it if you don't leave my porch. And they just keep banging on the door, saying the same things. You're going to regret it if you don't help us. You're going to regret it if you don't help us. So he goes, gets his shotgun, loads it, comes down, opens the door, and the kids are gone. Like, in the kids, the two that were there they were both boys. So when he opens the door, those two kids are gone. And there's a slightly older girl standing on his porch, but she's turned away from him. And she has like light blonde or white hair. And he's instantly like, oh, who are you? And why are you on my porch? And she just says, you won't need that gun. Put it down. And he's like, okay. He just kind of puts he doesn't even think about it. And she asks him, where did they go? How long ago did they leave? And he said, well, I just went to get my gun and I just came back. So they just left. And she says, that's good. And she turns around and looks at him, and her eyes, instead of black, are like white, but almost glowing white. And she says, you won't have to worry about them again. And he's just like, okay. And she turns around, she walks off his porch, and he just closes the door, puts the gun down, sits down, and goes back to watching TV. And then it was later, after the fact, that he was just like, what, why did I just listen to what she said? It was really weird. So it's, from what they're saying in this book, it's not clear if white-eyed kids are like another species, another version of them, and they're the anti-black-eyed kids who, I don't think anything that can control you telepathically could be a good thing, but there's that out there too. So if you're looking at black-eyed kids, be prepared for more things than that. So the second book, the chilling true terror of black-eyed kids, I pulled a couple stories out of here. Now the first one, so this guy's he's at home, he's asleep. It's in the middle of December or January. It's either way, it's the dead of winter, super cold outside. He's asleep for a few hours, and he starts to hear this tapping on his windows. Not like a banging, not knocking, just tapping on his windows. But on like all the windows on the first floor. And he starts hearing this tapping. So he goes downstairs, and he thinks it's like neighborhood kids pulling a prank, but he's in no mood for it. It wakes him up. He goes downstairs, he throws the door open, and surprise, surprise, there's two kids standing on his porch. Both boys, one's taller, one's shorter. And the shorter kid is the one who talks in this instance and asks, again, in a very monotone and emotionless voice, "Please let us in. We want to use your telegraph." And it takes him by surprise a little bit. But telegraph? He said, why, what? He goes, I hate to break it to you, but I don't have a telegraph in my house. And honestly, pranking people at 3 o'clock in the morning is a dumb thing to do, especially when you're dealing with a grumpy old guy like me. Knock it off, go home. And the kids slowly look up at him and start staring at him. And that's when he realizes they got black eyes. Again, everybody says the same thing. There's no whites. There's no color whatsoever. Just black eyes. So he's just like, nope. Closes the door. Runs to the kitchen. Grabs the phone. And calls the cops. And he gets the dispatcher. And he's like, look, there's these these kids on my porch. I don't know what they're doing. You got to send an officer. And these two black-eyed kids start yelling into the house and banging on the house. And he said, it's loud. I'm walking close to the door. It's loud. I'm holding the phone out, and the dispatcher can't hear it. So it's another one of these weird things where certain people can see them, other people can't. Some people can hear them, other people can't. And, he says, look, I need you to send police out. And they're like, okay, we'll send somebody. And he hangs up, goes upstairs, tries to ignore them. It dies down. He goes to sleep. And then he finds out in the morning, he calls the police to find out what happened. And like, yeah, we never actually sent anybody. We thought you were joking. But there's other stories throughout these two books where there might be multiple people in the house. And one person will go open the door. And then they'll come back a couple minutes later and they'll be like, that was really weird. Did you hear what they said? And the second person will be in just the next room, within earshot of any conversation that can happen at the door, and either not hear any of it or think that they were talking to themselves. Like, I thought you were losing your mind. I thought you were at the door talking to yourself. So it raises this other possibility of, are they even really there? Are they a projection into your mind? Maybe they're nearby and projecting into your mind, or maybe they're interdimensional, and only some people can see them, or they can show themselves to certain people. It's really weird, and I didn't want to cover every story like that because a lot of them start out the same. Knock on the door, I open the door, they get terrified. There's these kids. But there's some interesting possibilities here with what these things are, these creatures are. And this next story, this comes from a woman who lives in New York. Well, at the time lived in New York. Her and her husband were lifetime New Yorkers. This is when they were still engaged. They were going on a dinner date. They were going to this restaurant that they had frequented often. And this place had a doorman, and they knew the place pretty well. So they drive up, they go into the parking lot, they park. And as they're parking their car, like they're still putting it in park, and there's a knock on the window. And at the driver's side window, the husband's driving, at the driver's side window, there's these two boys. And immediately, this woman is freaked out. He doesn't even really see them. She just gets this immediate sense of danger and terror. And she looks at her husband. She goes, I just want to leave. Let's just leave. This is really weird. Let's just leave. And the husband's like, no, we came here for dinner. I guess the fiance at the time. He's like, no, we're not going anywhere. We are staying for dinner. And he starts to get out of the car. Well, they both start to get out of the car. And he gets out of the car, and he opens the door, and the two kids back up, and they let him out. And he closes the door, And the wife gets out, and as she gets out, she gets a better look at them. And that's when she sees the black eyes. And now she's really terrified. And I think it's the older looking kid says to him, we need a ride in your car. Like, really weird. We need a ride in your car. And in a very New York kind of a reply, the guy goes, not even looking at him, just locking the door. He hasn't even looked at their face yet. Just locking the door, goes, yeah, well, you're shit out of luck. And then he turns around and looks at him. And he sees the black eyes. And again, they see black as coal. No color in them whatsoever. No whites, nothing. So one kid again says, we need a ride. We need to go see our friend. And the husband's like, he's kind of freaked out now. And he's like, you're going to have to take the subway. I don't know what to tell you. And they start backing away and start heading towards the restaurant. And these kids, they start with this weird, like screaming, high-pitched, weird yell, howl kind of thing. And they're like, all right, this is getting weird. They walk in the restaurant, they see the doorman, and they say, look, I don't know what's going on in the parking lot, but you need to get someone out here, get these kids out of there. And the doorman's like, what are you talking about? He's like, you don't hear them screaming? He's like, no, we'll send someone out to look at it. He goes, but probably just kids. So they go in, they have their meal, and they come out, and they're like, oh, these kids are gone. They get out to the car, they're gone. So they're like, great. They go home, and everything seems fine. But the wife, she's feeling a little out of sorts for the next few weeks. She's getting headaches. She can't really sleep. When she can sleep, she's having nightmares of these black-eyed kids and things like that. But she just thinks, okay, this is the end of it. Right? So a few weeks go by. We're never going to see them again. And it's maybe a month later, a little more than a month later, and she's talking to her husband, and she asks him if he remembers this weird incident with these kids at the restaurant. And he's like, yeah, matter of fact, yeah, I remember that. Saw him again, too. And she's like, what do you mean you saw him again? He's like, yeah, I was at work. And I was leaving work, and they were standing by my car. And I saw him again. I'm like, look, guys, I'm not helping you. I don't know how you found out where I work, but I'm not helping you. And they said to him, we need a ride in your car. We need to go see our friend. He's the only one who can help us. And he's like, I'm not helping you. I'm not giving you a ride. And they're like, we need a ride. You need to take us to such and such address. And he just hears the address in his head, and he's like, I'm not helping you. You're out of luck. He gets in his car, and he leaves. And he thinks that's the end of it. That's the last time he sees him. So you fast forward a few years, and they're moving out of New York. They're moving to New Jersey. They've been looking at a few houses, and the wife has picked out one that she really likes this house. So she wants the husband to go check it out. She takes him there. He sees the address that they're going to, and he realizes it's the exact address that these black-eyed kids' friend lived at years before. It's the address that they gave him that he had to take them to. They don't mention if they actually moved to that house or not. I don't think I would. I'd be like, nope, want nothing to do with that place. Who is this person that could help them? And is it just coincidence that they gave that address? There is, in some of these stories, this, like I said, telepathy. But more than telepathy, more of like a knowing. One story, the woman said it was a black-eyed adult. She was walking down the street to go get her car. I think her car was in the garage or something like that. She was going to get her car. And there was this homeless man. And I don't remember, there was a couple of them that talked about homeless men who wound up being black-eyed adults. And I don't know if she remembered seeing this guy before or if he was new to the area and she didn't really know who he was or hadn't seen him around. And as she's walking by him, though, he just says, if you could spare any change, anything you have can help me. And in her mind, she's like, do I have any change? And she's like, oh, it's all in the bottom of my purse. And I don't want to stop and dig for it. So she just kind of acts like she didn't hear him. And she walks past. And she gets past him and he asks again, do you have any change? Anything you can help? Anything you can do will help. Michella, which was her name. And she stops dead. And she turns around. She looks at this guy. She's like, do I know him? And she looks at him. She's like, I don't know him. And he looks up and like through his hair, like it's down his face, black eyes. And he just stares at her and grins. And she just takes off. But so there's like this knowing, like they can read minds, not just influence, but they can read minds. These are really, really weird stories. Now I don't know anybody who's had an experience with black-eyed kids. I know people who don't want to have experiences with black-eyed kids, and I can understand that. These are creepy, creepy stories. So let me know if you've had any black-eyed kid kind of experience. One of the weird things that I've noticed, and it's talked about in one of these books, I think the second one, and they're talking about how a lot of these stories are in the U.S., but the stories that follow this particular pattern of the kids being there, asking for help. When you don't help, they get agitated and either start banging on the door louder or tell you that you're going to regret it, and then they disappear. In other countries, they don't seem to be as interactive, which is weird. There's black-eyed people in other cultures, but they're usually just seen. And they don't usually say anything. There was one story I read from England, but the guy was an American traveling to England, and he kept hearing something out in the hall, sound like a child crying, and then when he went out and looked in the hall, he saw this girl standing down at the end of the 10-year-old girl standing at the end of the hallway with her head down, which is very common, looking down, couldn't see her face, and then she slowly looked up and brushed the hair from her eyes, and I think in this story there was just holes where her eyes should be, but it was just pitch black, and she just started giggling, and he's like, nope, and turned around and went back in his room, and then this girl came to the door and just started knocking on the door, just saying, let me in, let me in, let me in, let me in, like just really creepy. And this friend that was in the same hotel room wouldn't wake up, didn't hear any of it. So really weird. But yeah, a lot of the other stories from overseas, they're there and they have similar features, but they don't really interact. It makes me wonder why in the United States this phenomenon seems to interact with the people. Really kind of weird. But let me know if you or someone you know has a black-eyed kid story. I'd really love to hear it. You can contact me at podcast@primitiveintelligence.com and send me your story. I would love to hear it. And if you want, I will read it on the podcast. And what do you think they could be? Like, I'm up in the air. Like, as I read the stories, I'm not sure what I would classify these as. Are they could some of these reports just be a prank? Someone's got some black contacts. One of them was weird, and I thought it might, I was gonna, I'll talk a little bit about it, but I read it, and I went, oh, I'm gonna put that into my notes, and then as I was putting it in the notes and I reread it, I was like, was this really a black-eyed kid encounter? The guy, again, gets a knock at the door, and it's him and his wife. He goes to the door, and the kid's out there and says, let me in, I need to use your phone or something like that. And he's like, I'm not letting you in. It's not happening. And the kid immediately is like, you'll regret it. And he goes, I'm not going to regret nothing. He goes, my wife's in here. She's calling the cops right now. And the kid says, you won't call anybody. Like, very, like, kind of creepy. But he says the weirdest thing about this kid, he was dressed in all black, had like black pants on, black t-shirt, black, like almost trench coat, had short black hair. I think he was wearing just sunglasses. And I think that's what one of the things that kind of, I was like, I don't know about this one. We're just wearing sunglasses, never sees his eyes. But he was eating an apple. All right. Which is, this is the only story I've seen where a black-eyed kid was eating an apple. So he's eating an apple. And this guy's like, nope, I'm not letting you in. We're going to call the cops. Kid says, you won't call anybody. And he goes, oh, we're going to call. And he goes, you got to get off my porch. And the kid says, well, can I at least get some ketchup for my apple? And he's like, what? No, get off my porch, go. So he closes the door. And he goes in, and he's talking to his wife. And this is one of the stories where she's like, I thought you were talking to yourself. I didn't hear any of that conversation. So he's like, all right, something really weird going on. He goes, starts looking out the door. They were getting ready for work, I think. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. I think it was in Las Vegas. So that's another thing. I was like, well, it's Vegas, so who knows? But he goes out and he starts looking around. And he doesn't see anything, but he checks the gate because how did this kid get into their property? A gate that you got to be able to get in there somehow. Yeah, it's got to open from the outside, but apparently it doesn't. Maybe you have to have a key to open it from the outside. And he's like, in order to open it from the outside, you've got to like reach over. And it's like he couldn't do it. And this kid was like 5 feet tall. So he's like, how did this kid open this gate? So they look around. He doesn't see anything. He sees no way the kid got in. The gate was latched. He noticed the gate was latched when the kid was on the porch. So, I mean, he could have closed the gate behind him, but it was just weird. So he tells his wife what the kid said. She's like, okay, whatever. That's weird. They go to work. They come back. And that's when she realizes that he was telling the truth. Because she goes, well, what's really weird is when we came back, she's like, I found this half-eaten apple on the steps. And it wasn't there after the kid left. And the husband had gone and checked the yard. And they went to work. The apple wasn't there. So at some point during the day, this kid returned and put the apple on the porch. Really, really bizarre. They do some weird things. They show up in weird ways. One, like they had like a bunch of steps coming up to their porch. And one of the kids, there's like the older kid and younger kid. And the younger kid was straddling a bicycle on the porch. And the lady is looking at the kid going, why would you bring that up the steps? You know, kids are kids and kids do weird things, but it's not a small bike. Why would you bring that all the way up these steps and then like not even stand next to it, like straddle it? Like, just really, really weird. Another story happened on like a military base in it might have been Army. And the guy thinks it's his roommate coming back and opens the door and there's 2 kids standing there and they want to come in and he's like, how did you get here? And they kind of get agitated. They asked and then he just closed the door and they kept knocking on the door. And the same story, but he asks like the guard at the gate, yo, does anybody have kids here? Like, how did these kids get in? They had no answer for it. They had no idea. So really, really bizarre where these things show up and how they show up sometimes. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Definitely check out those 2 books. Like I said, their Amazon links will be in the show notes. That's just give you the information. If you want to look at them, you can get them on Amazon. You can just get the information, get them from wherever. But that's the easiest way to get you the information in those books. So again, if you got a story that you want to share, especially with black-eyed kids, they're creepy stories. I kind of don't like reading them, but I do like reading them. So send them my way, podcast@primitiveintelligence.com. Well, that's going to do it for me for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you don't see any black-eyed kids. Enjoy the rest of your week. See ya.